Thank you, Karen and Rachel, for inviting me. Good morning, everybody. Oh, really? Really? Unlike Brian, I didn't stay from my vacation. I flew over. I'm delighted to be here this morning. Karen had asked me to talk a little bit about some of the trends that are affecting global M&A in general, and also European M&A in particular. But before I launch into those trends, I wanted to talk about, just to give everybody something to think about. Where are we in the Madtech life cycle? Is it sunrise? Are we all enjoying a bright future? You know, what are some of the things that are happening? Well, I think one of the things that would suggest the answer is yes, is innovation continues at a tremendous pace right now and across the globe. Innovation in Silicon Valley, New York, London, the Netherlands, Berlin, and particularly in APAC at this time. Consolidation on a large scale with acquisitions like AT&T, Time Warner, AppNexus. You're seeing a tremendous amount of consolidation across a variety of different sectors. That's a positive thing because it creates new opportunities, new businesses. I was going to mention the trade desk, which we're a seed investor in, but after Brian talking about it being overhyped, I just don't want to talk about it for the moment. By the way, hype is good. Is it midday for us in the ad tech business? I would suggest that there's an argument to be made that there is, and for one of the main reasons is private equity has re-entered the fray, both as investors and buyers, particularly in the United States and Europe. You're seeing a large number of transactions happen whereby PE groups, and PE groups only buy companies that are profitable, you know, and have scale. And that suggests that the market right now in ad tech is a very positive one. We're seeing that a lot of companies have been flushed out of the market that may not have been had those attributes. I'm going to save this for another time, but that's one of my favorite slides, the technology hype slide. Sunset. Well, there's an argument to be made that the sun is setting in ad tech, hopefully to rise again, and that's just if you think about the amount of investment that's being made from VCs. If you take a look at 2015, there was $1.6 billion invested in Madtech in the United States between 2015. In 2018, it's projected to be about $750 million. In terms of the number of companies being funded in Europe right now, you're seeing about 136 in 2015, down to 34 this year. Or is it apocalypse? I would say no, but if you'd asked me maybe 18 months ago, possibly, right? We saw a tremendous amount of depreciation, and Brian talked a little bit about some of the companies that were that went public, right? Lost a tremendous amount of value. You know, Criteo we've already talked about. Seismic was close to $2 billion, sold for $122 million. You have Rocket Fuel, obviously $2 billion, down to $145. Yumi, $1.3, $185. And then you had a whole host of others as the market began to recognize the value and the growth opportunities of those companies just weren't there at the time. You also had another phenomenon, which was VCs began defunding some of the companies in their portfolio in the last 2 years, between 16 and 17. And that effectively meant that companies that did not get additional funding from their VC parents had to go out and find a home. And one of the challenges, if you're not profitable, and the world in 15, 16, and 17, what was the famous phrase, right? We're in a land grab right now. Well, when you're in a land grab, you're usually not profitable. And when the music stops and you're not profitable, you've got to find a home. And in 16 and 17, there was a lot of companies that did not find homes. Well, let's move on to some of the trends that are affecting Madtech. And this is a topic that, frankly, we could talk about for a long time, but I'll just hit on 4. There's the global decline of linear audiences. Obviously, the mega shift from traditional linear TV audiences to OTT and video. Trexit. What's Trexit? The global tug-of-war and global GDPR and privacy regulations, which obviously everybody's talking about. Everybody know this mime? Right? Traditional TV audiences in the United States alone, the United States paid TV subscribers, there was a loss of 5 million paid TV subscribers in the past several years. That trend is happening in Europe as well. And why is that trend happening? Obviously, because of the device that's in all our pockets, right? The millennials and Gen Zs, this is their device, and this is their device of choice to watch content, read content, whether that content is legible content or that content is video content. Reinforces the fact that there's been a tremendous loss of the subscribers across the board. And ultimately, when you take a look at the video and OTT marketplace, you're going to find three distinct buckets, right? You need content creation, if you're going to be in it. You need content distribution, and you need content monetization. Take a look at some of the companies in the circles right now, and you'll notice that they too have, because frankly, when you take a look at who was going after those eyeballs that were shifting from traditional TV, and where does advertising go? Advertising follows eyeballs, and if eyeballs are moving from linear TV to traditional or to OTT and video, that's where the advertising dollars go. Well, that's where the telcos have decided to go, the cable companies have decided to go, and a lot of the media companies have decided to go. So with all the eyes on the prize, right? The first wave, if you all remember, was the MCNs. Everybody thought they were buying a brand new channel. So Disney buying Maker, Viacom Awesomeness. We sold ZoomIn.tv to MTG up in the Nordics, which is ZoomIn's the 5th largest MCN in the world. Over on the content side, ATT has been on a tear, and most people are talking about Time Warner and AppNexus, but they bought DirecTV before, right? You've got obviously AOL and Oath. You've got AOL and Yahoo. And over on the tech and mobile side, you've seen, again, another telco make a major play. You've seen Singtel buy Amobi, followed by Turn, followed by Videology. RTL, they bought Spot Exchange, and then they bought the distribution side, the monetization side, they bought SmartClip, another one of our companies. Trexit. What's Trexit? Yikes. Right? There's been two major trends that have happened. Actually, the irony is, if I stood on the stage 3 years ago, and one of my predictions was that when I come back in 3 years, you're going to see Donald Trump as the president of the United States, and the United Kingdom will have voted to get out of the European Union, you'd all thought I was nuts. Well, it happened. One's not necessarily bad. Politics aside, right? Politics aside, the introduction of a pro-business president in the United States has generated an enormous boost to the economy, right? Corporate tax rates going from 35% to 21% has put an enormous amount of cash back into the U.S. economy. In fact, I think the economy, Brian can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the U.S. economy last month was growing at a 4% clip. That, with plus corporate balance sheets that are flush with cash, has created a trend whereby there's been ideal for massive consolidation across the board in Madtech. That's a really good thing. Over here in the United Kingdom, it's been a little bit more challenging, right, with Brexit, because Brexit is, right now, there's a lot of uncertainties. And one thing about markets, particularly M&A markets, they don't like uncertainty. What is the global tug of war? Well, this is not a kitty cat, but we're talking a little bit about about one of the trends that I think is really interesting and unique, which is how the consultants have entered into, again, chasing the almighty advertising dollar, how the consultants have entered into the world of the advertising agency world. And they are frightened, right? Why could they do it, and why could they do it so easily? Well, we can talk a little bit about that if Kieran wants to talk about it, but obviously there's that transparency issue Brian brought up before, which you all know in Madtech. That is an issue and a very real issue. But the other side of it, the consultants have always been hired by the CEO and the board of directors. So they've entered from a very different sphere within companies, plus they've entered with a very high level of trust. So fear and greed, right? Fear, they enter this market, fear because they were afraid that their traditional business could be marginalized, and greed is They've got the trust, they've got the access. If they go out and acquire the assets that they need to compete, they can. And they have been on a tremendous buying spree for the past. And not only, they've been not only in the agency side, agency services, but technology as well. GDPR. Well, I'm going to talk about this, but before I do, I need everybody to opt in this conversation. So, honey, I shrunk the data pool, right? It's been unprecedented what's happened, right? When GDPR was announced in May, you had a large number of US ad tech companies cease operations in Europe. You've had, obviously, Cambridge Analytics followed right after that, with Zuckerberg being skewered by the Senate, followed last week by Jack Dorsey and Sheryl Sandberg of Facebook, again, all over data privacy. Now, you know, we could talk all day about what the ultimate ramifications are in the long term, but in the short term, I see two things. One is you're going to see ad dollars look for safe havens in the interim, right? They're going to go to the walled garden where they have large pools of first-party data. That's not necessarily long-term, but short-term. I do see that gravitation there. The second is, on the M&A side, you're going to see a lot more scrutiny. If you're in the market, you're about to go into the market, and data is part of your asset, you're going to see a tremendous amount of scrutiny. We just closed a transaction last Friday, sold a company called Listen First Media Social Analytics to a private equity group, and they had hired something that they'd never done before, two different privacy experts to scrutinize their data. So quickly, before Kieran and I sit down and have a chat, some predictions. You know, again, predictions could go on all day, but net neutrality is more of an issue in the United States, and people really aren't talking about it, but it's beginning to bubble up. Right? The idea that the telcos or internet service providers can go ahead and slow down speeds for certain clients is a frightening thing. Right? GDPR we already talked about. Global economic slowdowns obviously are worried. Trust, right? And the other I put up there is failure of M&A. Now, what do I mean by failure of M&A? There's been a tremendous amount of consolidation, whether it's with the telcos, whether it's with the cable companies, across the board. Frankly, you know, Brian goes ahead and covers Adobe and Salesforce and those guys. Those guys have continued to, and they're great acquirers, right? Those guys have continued to build out their marketing stacks, as evidenced most recently by Grapeshot being sold to Oracle. But if the acquisitions over on the ad tech side aren't successful, that always allows people to makes people pause before they go ahead with further acquisitions. On the other side, we are seeing a lot more ad tech and martech companies that are profitable. And I can tell you profitability matters in an exit. Blockchain, AI, and machine learning hold fantastic promises for the ad tech world. I'm a big believer that we're not there yet, even though what we do in the ad tech business is hype. You know, how many companies have changed their own websites to say AI, machine learning, blockchain? And what ends up happening, that ends up clouding the true meaning of the value of the proposition itself. But there is great promise in the future for it. And the other thing I would say is voice search, which we'll probably hear about from Dom at Captify later today, natural language processing. And one of the great things, it's good news for all of us, I believe, is that still the majority of companies around the world need to digitize. So my view is the sun's rising. Thanks very much. Yep. Anywhere you want.
You sit there.
Perfect.
Thank you, Jay.
You're welcome.
Hello. 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 Welcome here to this year's ATS. Obviously, Rachel did the intro. I'm just doing my own intro, so welcome. Jay, thank you very much for that presentation. Obviously, M&A is always a nice sort of water cooler discussion sort of topic, you know. And I want to talk about the biggest one this year because it has such an influence on this crowd. Because a lot of the businesses some of the businesses in this conference have probably either are partners of this company or have built a business on top of this company. I want to talk about the AppNexus or the AT&T acquisition of AppNexus. We're still trying to figure out what the name is. Some say it might be AppNexus. AdNexus?
It'll be AT&T soon.
AT&T on Nexus?
AT&T Media.
Okay, AT&T Media. So just talk about that specific acquisition, because it'd been predicted a year before that, when Brian Lesser joined the company, that they may end up buying AppNexus. But do you see more deals like this coming down the line? Like AT&T's made a big outlay for AppNexus, nearly $2 billion. But can you see more of this happening, particularly as a traditional linear TV companies look to sort of buy companies like AppNexus to sort of compete with the Facebooks and Googles?
Well, they certainly need technology, right? I mean, I think that's one of the slides I had that probably glossed over fairly quickly is, right, when you're looking at, you need content creation, you need content distribution, you need content monetization, right? And you take a look at the companies that want to get into that business. First, they went out and acquired the content, right? Back in the MCN world, they're trying to get the content. But then they need the distribution side of things. And the distribution side of thing is generally tech, right? And so AppNexus acquisition by AT&T is a linchpin, no different than really RTL with buying Spot Exchange and Singtel buying Turn. These are necessary evils, or I wouldn't say evils. These are necessary businesses that they need to be able to distribute their content and then ultimately monetize them.
Do you think it's a good move? Because I sat down with Tom Rogers a couple of weeks ago, and he said it's a bit too late in the game for AT&T to buy in tech.
I don't
Obviously, you're a banker,
agree.
you're biased, obviously.
But I would argue that the acquisition by Verizon to AOL/Yahoo is not working out well.
That has been very controversial. Yes, yeah.
Right,
Oath is obviously spot. I love Oath, by the way. I love Timmy Armstrong. Timmy, if you're out there, we love you.
Yeah, he's also
Godspeed to next role.
His next role.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Where will he end up, do you reckon?
Yeah. He's going to take over Trump's job.
Oh God! All right. Okay.
Look, I mean, I think that the AT&T acquisition, they've been slowly getting in that game, for a while now, right? They've, again, most people forget they bought DirecTV, and that was a major acquisition for them. Then buying additional content with Time Warner, when you're getting Turner. And the assets that these companies had. Now you need to, if you're going to get into the digital side of things, and data is obviously a huge, that's where it's going to be a little murky right now, obviously, until the data privacy laws get sorted out in the United States. I mean, California coming up and passing its own legislation, and I have a couple terminals on my desk, and so I was watching the Senate hearings with both Zuckerberg and with Jack Dorsey. It's frightening how smart all of those people are and how
stupid.
Well, certainly ill-informed about our sector that they are.
Informed.
Right.
Yeah.
And these are the people who are going to make laws, right? These are the people who are going to make, and things are going to happen. I mean, you've now got Bernie Sanders talking about it. Sorry to be just talking U.S.
No, it's fine.
But you've got Bernie Sanders now who is introducing the Jeff Bezos tax law.
Yeah. And I saw Trump is thinking about breaking up Google this morning because I think he's great. He's a great president.
I saw that Boris Johnson wants to go ahead and lower taxes here in the UK.
Boris Johnson, what a legend, future leader, absolute gobshite. As is the Conservative Party. Just because I said that for
there you go.
And you've got quoting me on that if you want to. So let's talk about. So obviously you were talking about it's really important for these deals to work, for more purchase to take place. And there's been some successful ad tech acquisitions. I mean, the RTL acquisition of SpotX has been very successful. So there's obviously clearly a hunger. But do you see the money being around TV? Is that where the sweet spot is at the minute? Because of sort of the death of linear in many ways, and sort of the move to a more fragmented consumption layer.
Well, I think again, if you're thinking about selling, or you're in that mode, you're a company owner, and you're saying, where's my home ultimately? The real key is, unless you have tremendous scale like an AppNexus, right, where you're going to be pulled. You've got to find the challenges or the gaps within the companies. Who's been buying, right, in this particular area? It's obviously the telcos, cable companies, media companies have been buying and expanding. Yes, for two reasons. One, the main reason is obviously digital video, right, and OTT, because that's where the eyeballs are, and that's the next generation. The millennials and Gen Z are looking at everything through their phone, and so short form content, long form content. So the question is, do you now address addressable TV, which everybody's talking about addressable TV, that will take off when there's universal measurement across the board, I believe. It's a little bit early at the moment.
And do you think companies like Rubicon, Teleria, these publicly listed companies are going to be acquired by, like, the private equity guys are obviously looking for profitability, right? They're looking for companies. What's the motivation between a PE firm to buy an ad tech company? I always thought it was a bit weird. I actually seen PE companies now buying ad networks, which I find, completely ridiculous. But obviously there's something in it. Ad networks make money, but what's the sort of objective?
Yeah, I think you remember private equity is really altruistic.
Is to make money. Yeah, but altruistic. True.
But look, at the end of the day, they're businesses, right? And if they see value, they're not going to buy rocket fuel at $2 billion. They're going to buy it at 122. Or Seismic was a perfect example, right? So they're not paying $2 billion for Seismic, but at $122 million, add on another couple of pieces, and now because the whole thing, and Brian will tell you this, everybody's talking about, right, full stack. That's what everybody's trying to achieve, is a full stack. Find the gaps in their stack. If you've got an asset that can fit and make their stack better, you're in a great position.
So this is a conference for the 20%ers, a phrase that I've coined over the last couple of years, because we are the 20%ers. Not that we're stupid by it. I know that's a kind of a reference to stupidity as well. But
I'm from New Jersey.
But 20%ers is we've got 20% of the industry, right? Whereas Facebook, Google, and Amazon have the rest. So, but do you think that is killing a lot of sort of M&A activity? Is it sort of prohibitive in allowing the growth of new business? Let's be honest here, Google has not innovated in 10 years, right? They just keep buying companies and having their stack.
Look, I think
same with Facebook for that matter as well.
You got Apple, Google, Facebook, and now Amazon. Amazon's valued at $1 trillion. Can you believe that?
I don't.
It's unbelievable to talk about overvalued or whatever. It's $1 trillion. And they are sucking out 70-80% of the dollars out of the ecosystem. I think one of the things that's fantastic, which is why I put the sun is coming up again, is that 2016 and 17 happened. There was way too many look-alike point solution companies in the space, and going out and selling, and this is the difficult thing, right? Going out to the media agencies and going out to the advertising, the brands, and saying, this is what we do, when it sounds like the guy who just left the office said the exact same thing. Differentiation's a difficult thing. So I think that's been cleansed to a degree. You're seeing a lot more profitable companies in ad tech, and I'm very bullish.
Okay. Well, what about Europeans? Obviously, we don't have as much scale as the Yanks. How can a European company sort of like build a successful business and exit? Like, what's the sort of strategy for that? Like,
yeah, I'm a big profitability person. I think, and unlike Brian, I didn't start in the banking world. I actually started pre-internet. I started a magazine out of college and owned a number of different media companies. So I came up from the operator side. And one of the things I learned from one of the businesses that I owned that crashed was if I'd been profitable, I could have survived a very difficult time. Right? Profitability really matters on an exit. And I think the idea of a land grab, particularly for European companies, that themselves, if you're in Europe, your market generally is a little bit smaller. If you want to go to the larger markets, you need a lot of dollars. A lot of people look at the United States and say, "Wow, they got 350 million consumers."
Do you think it'd be wise to sort of, from a European ad tech perspective, is to look at one market like the UK? If you're from the UK, do really well there and get to the US as quickly as possible and ignore the Europeans, right? Likewise, the French do well in the French market, get to US. Or is it the case?
I wouldn't generalize. I think because a question of funding, question of is your business going to port to a particular market? I think you need to understand where your particular consumers or customers are and will be, and what the landscape looks like. The United States has got a lot of opportunity, but it's got a lot of competitors. So. Yeah. You might be, there's a lot of companies. I think Media IQ did a really good job.
Yeah, because they're street smart. They fight. You got to fight to the death here for IOs. It's really hard to get money off agencies. I'm telling you. Yeah. Well, it's not all long dinners. You have to be good at your job.
Go to the consultancies.
Yeah, I want to talk about the consultancies. This is my last question, obviously, because we're running tight today. But I wanted to talk about that actually, because that's quite interesting. Where do you think Sir Marty Sorrell fits into this? Like, so obviously he's got his own company now. Like, do you think companies like him can come out of nowhere and challenge? Because it's kind of a left field question, obviously, and he was invited to speak here today, and he just said, "Not my thing." One email response, that's all he said. to my long email, kissing his ass. I spent 6 paragraphs kissing his ass. You're amazing, Sir Marty. You're brilliant. Oh, I love you. I even call you Sir Marty, even though I'm Irish. I think the knighthood's crazy. But yeah, Sir Marty. And he just said, not my fucking thing. That's what he said. I just injected the fucking there, but it's just not my thing. Anyway, let's talk about him. But companies coming out of the blue, like his entity, do you think he's got a chance to compete with this fight over marketer budgets?
Well, I'd rather talk about how come I got a one-line email. He got a whole paragraph.
It's true.
Thank you.
Yeah, but we got drunk together. That's different. Martin Sorrell can't drink a pint. Like, it's size him. He couldn't hold his drink. I'd fall over.
I'm not going to get into that. Look, I mean, I would never bet against him. I think that what I would say is that both relevant for the IO business that you're in, the M&A business that I'm in, I think WPP would be back.
Okay.
Do
you think Mark Reed, he's a good hire?
I think he's a spectacular hire.
Why?
I think
By the way, he spoke on this stage a couple of years ago. He's very good, very impressive.
Well, maybe that's why.
Yeah. I knew he was going far.
Yeah, I know. No, I think I would never bet against Martin Sorrell. He's obviously an amazing individual who knows the space, has access to capital, he's got his own capital. He's got a lot of money still invested in WPP, so he's probably not. He's probably going to...
It's a win-win for him, really, isn't it? Like,
it depends on...
if you read the Daily Mail, obviously.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Anyway, Jay, thank you very much.
Kieran, pleasure. Thank you all.